Good afternoon, since it's like 40 seconds after noon. And just a brief introduction both in Italian and English. Questa è una sessione che si terrà in inglese. This is an English language session. Io tuttavia, se serve, sono a disposizione per tradurre dall'italiano in inglese eventuali domande, opinioni e interazioni, perché questa dovrebbe essere una sessione, un evento interattivo. This will be an English language event, but I'm ready to help with translating questions or things people have to say in Italian and things you have to say in Italian into English, okay? And my name is Tedeschini Lalli. I'm the Deputy Director of Innovation and Development of Gruppo L'Espresso and longtime member of the Online News Association, which happens to be the largest digital journalists association in the world. And we partner with the Journalism Festival since 2009, and this event is to follow up on the one we did last year when we launched our Build Your Own Ethics Code initiative, putting out some documents on issues, on ethical issues, and we had a crowdsourcing phase when people pitched in suggestions and so on. And now the organization is building, and we will talk about this, a tool to actually help people decide and build their own code. You see here the simplified URLs of the original documents, ONA crowdsourcing, and the new URL about which we are going to talk a little bit later. So what's the idea behind this, paradoxical thing that you build your own ethical code? It is that any journalist, blogger, news organization who wants to think about the way they produce journalism in an ethical way, they are helped consider different issues. But of course, they have to start somewhere. We have to have a common language, so to say. So there is a first step, is to agree on some, shall we say, ethical postulates, and like telling the truth, don't accept money to change your story, and respect, of course, your community, and don't plagiarize. I mean,
correct your errors.
Correct your errors. So we either we agree on those very, very basic issues, or of course,
you're not really a journalist.
You're not. So this is if we agree, we then can go to step 2, which is to decide or state whether the journalism we are producing is of the objective kind or of the point of view kind. Of course, the objective kind is the kind of journalism where you strive to be impartial, strive not to suggest actions or point or opinions, to stress opinions in spite of others, shall we say. While the point of view journalism is the kind of journalism where you do have a point of view, you state it, but of course, since you're still a journalist, of course you strive to present also opposing point of views in a proper way. But there is, let's say, another way of looking at this issue, and it's whether your journalist is independent or involved, meaning that you may be involved, like if you are doing something because you're part of an organization that deals with, we were saying, climate change, all right? But still you can be, so you are involved, you're not independent because you're part of an organization that deals with these issues, but you can still have an objective or a point of view journalism. Or you can be independent of any organization and still have an objective approach or a point of view approach. Then at that point, you're set, meaning that you are ready to confront and debate among yourself, if you're one-person operation or with your colleagues, the issues on which serious and committed journalists may have different answers to. These are just a few. The group that has been working on this has highlighted 40 issues, like accuracy, how do you use audio, how do you go about covering children when they are part of the news, or when you have to interview them, and so on, or how do you handle quotes, what you put under quote, within quotation marks or not. You know, different cultures differ on many of these things, and of course there are, in certain countries, like these countries, there may be charters, professional charters, or sometimes the law dictates what you can do and you cannot do. Of course, each journalist will deal with their own legal situation in their own place, but it's useful to have, you know, a general idea of what the issues are, and then, of course, you will deal also with the legal situation. So, this is basically how the system works. What a group of Italian ONA members did, and what we are launching this morning, this very moment, is the translation in Italian. Oh, here we go. Hopefully.
There it is.
There it goes. Wow. Of the original material that was launched last year that prepared the crowdsourcing, was used in the crowdsourcing phase of the exercise. And we thought useful to have, you know, all the documents here, although, of course, people have been working on them and going beyond them, and what you will find later on in the year will be much more, much deeper than it is. But I think it's useful for what we discuss in this country to have, you know, a translation of the documents, so to see what are the kind of issues that the international level journalists ask themselves. And you see there are a number of them, like you know, what to do with, again, accuracy on what to do with words, or censorship, or, I mean, censorship is not just, you know, some mythical thing that some mythical power can do to yourself. You may be in a war situation where censorship is low, and what you do then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is basically, you're, of course, we are happy if you tweet and, and share this link. And there is this, we can go back to this simplified URL, which is bit.ly/ONA Etica, E-T-I-C-A. And I should have done this before, but I'm sorry, I was, you know, somewhat nervous. I had to introduce my friends here. So, please meet Thomas Kent. He's the standards editor of the Associated Press, but he's the lead person in this exercise on behalf of ONA, of the ONA Ethics Initiative. And then we have Jane McDonnell, who is the executive director of the organization, and of course it's a big part of this whole thing. So I'm sorry, my friends. And I think I'll better pass the mic to you.
Fine. Well, thank you. Thanks very much, Mario. We're in the process now of actually constructing a very interactive website that will allow people to construct their own ethical code. We're still designing it. We're still working on it. But to give you a general idea, we will take the people through the fundamental ethical principles that we think you pretty much have to accept if you want to be a journalist at all, and then through the choice of objective or point of view or independent and involved journalist, and then take you into these 40 areas, specific areas of inquiry. And we want to create a site that will make it possible to actually make decisions and create your ethical code on these 40 or so areas that reflect your own views. So if we look, for example, at a page here, this is a verification and transparency of information page. And like the other pages, this is just a mock-up for the moment, but like the other pages, we will have a set of statements, and then you can decide which statements you agree with and which statements you disagree with. Here we have the person here has selected yes, yes, no, they don't agree with that, yes, they agree with that. And then you will be able to edit the statements and adjust them exactly to what your point of view is. So we hope it will be a very effective tool that will let people actually create and export an ethics code that fits their requirements. So we're hoping that this will be complete, that the editorial work on it and the development work will be concluded by the time the ONA has its conference in September in Los Angeles. And at that point it will be available, and the Italian translation is being worked on alongside this, and we hope that at that time or shortly afterward we'll have the entire site available in Italian as well. We propose this for news companies, for independent journalists, for bloggers, for journalism students, because quite often in journalism classes, students are asked to create their own ethical codes, so this is a tool to do that. We know that there are a lot of ethical codes that exist already, that many countries have their own ethical codes, many journalism organizations have their codes, but we know that for a lot of people, they would like to have some sense of ownership of the code. They would like to feel that they had played a role in creating their code. And so this is an opportunity to put a personal stamp on the code. So that is basically our project. And unless there's anything else I need to mention about this, we'd like to move on to what I think our main goal is today, is to talk about some of the specific ethical issues that have come up in working on this project and get your ideas about them to help us supplement the materials that we have on our site about these ethical questions. So Jane McDonnell and I are going to go through some of the questions on the site, and we would like your advice. What should an ethical journalist do in these situations? And we recognize that from country to country, from culture to culture, these questions may differ. So, shall we take one to begin with?
Okay, I'm going to stand up because I forgot my glasses, so bear with me.
Abbiamo bisogno del microfono, la signora può stare in piedi?
Huh?
Okay. You need a mic.
Oh, I think everyone can hear me now?
No, this is streaming.
But the
Oh,
streaming.
they're streaming. Thank
Plus, if you want to do a song or something.
Oh, okay, tap dance maybe. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with ethical problem number 1, which is you discover a 15-person Facebook group where gay teens are discussing the harassment they face. Should you A, ask permission before using any quotes from the discussion for a story, or B, feel free to use quotes without permission, and this group shows no privacy settings. So we're going to go to you to ask what you think about this particular question.
Oh, you have to get your mic closer to your mouth.
Okay, can you hear me better now? Okay.
Per il pubblico dobbiamo usare lo stesso? Sì, dico, siccome adesso stiamo interpellando il pubblico, dobbiamo usare lo stesso microfono? No. Ok, I'll hand the microphone.
Thank you, Mario.
What would be your answer? La vostra
Answer B. Feel free to use quotes without permission.
No, I'm sorry. Answer A.
Answer A.
A.
Who says B? Why don't you come all closer so it's easier? Okay. Perhaps we can comment a little bit about
Yes,
this.
yes, please.
Yes, please.
Please comment.
For me, if the group shows no privacy settings, it's B. Because there are no privacy settings. So the group have decided to be public. Their discussion is public because there are no privacy settings.
Let's hear the opposing view.
I think A, because there's just children 15 years old and maybe they just have forgot to set their privacy settings. And I think their discussion is part of the private domain.
I'd be interested in hearing what this gentleman's reason was for picking A, too. Yep.
I think they are teens for the same reason. Maybe they forgot about the privacy settings, or they feel free to write things, but they won't be on a newspaper or something like this.
Let's see.
Well, let me just ask a question. I understand the point about the privacy settings, but do you think that even 15-year-olds should understand that Facebook is a fairly public place?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but isn't Facebook from 18 years? You can only register when you're 18, I think.
Well, I guess anybody can say that they're 18.
Then you can't know that you're 15.
Right.
But I would probably say that from moral point of view, I would go for A, surely. But if we look at, for example, Daily Mail, they obviously choose option B all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Depends if you want to be ethical journalist.
Well, I mean, this is the whole meaning of the exercise, right?
Right. Okay. So most people here feel it's A, most, but not everyone, right? Okay. We'll move on.
I think I may go to this microphone so that we don't have this issue with the, is that okay? Then I have two of them. Okay, I'll do my best here. In a country where journalists are paid irregularly, if at all, which may sound familiar, a company gives $10 to any reporter who attends their press conferences. Should reporters A, accept the money since it's given to everyone and they need it, or B, refuse it and try to make money elsewhere?
Idee, opinioni? I think there is...
I think it's difficult, but in any case, for $10, I think I wouldn't accept. If more, maybe.
So if it's $10, it's okay to accept? You're saying?
Well, it doesn't worth. No.
It's not worth it.
Oh, it's not worth accepting.
No, not worth.
Oh. Of course, there are countries, you know, I'm thinking of countries where $10 is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking this happens in some African countries in particular, where journalists use this money to feed their families.
Danilo.
Well, I think it's a huge problem because I think even Italy is a country where stringers are paid like so irregularly and so few in many cases. And most of the times they are kind of compelled to accept because they have the dream to become journalists, and which dream now is kind of becoming impossible. And so if I was one of them, I think I would refuse.
Other contributions on this?
Let me ask a question. In Italy, the situation is a little different. You probably don't depend on the $10 to eat, to buy food for your family. But suppose it were really the question of survival. Does that change the situation?
If I may add, the situation as is shown here may have something to do if your organization, which is perhaps an established organization here in this country, and you are, fully, regularly paid journalists, but you use freelancers or stringers in one of those countries who work for you. But your policy, of course, your ethical guidelines are supposedly applicable to all of your coverage. So, maybe this is more from the Western point of view, it's perhaps the more realistic situation. What would you do with this? Paolo? Danilo, shall I?
I think if I had to buy food with the money I earn doing the journalist and money are $10, I think I should go and try to find another job.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so ethical problem.
Just a second. For people just arrived, per persone appena arrivate, questa sessione è in inglese, ma io sono a disposizione per tradurre dall'italiano in inglese.
Ethical problem number 3. A legal conflict breaks out over a racist cartoon in a small magazine. A big story, but most have never seen the offensive cartoon in question. Should you A, run the cartoon so people can fully understand the case, B, not run it because of its content? And I think there's been a lot of discussion over that, especially over the last few months.
But I think this was, you had this slide also in Chicago, right? This was before the Charlie Hebdo thing.
We actually thought about this situation before Charlie Hebdo, but it's particularly relevant now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think all of you have an idea about it. I mean, it's been discussed all over the world. So, what's your take?
I think it's if it is a really racist cartoon, I would not run it. If it's just offensive, it's another story. But if it's a really racist cartoon, you can it's in Holland, it's forbidden by law to publish it, and you can just describe it in words what you see on the cartoon without printing it. But there's a difference between racist cartoons and just offensive cartoons. Offensive, no problem.
Right. So in that case, you feel that the law in the Netherlands is in line with ethical principles? That the
I think the law regulates a lot less than you, as a journalist, have to decide on ethical problems. Ethical problems is bigger. It's a gray area. The law doesn't decide all of the problems. And as a journalist, you always have to think about the consequences. Even if it's allowed by the law, you have to think.
That's also the situation in the United States where the law allows almost anything. So everything becomes a journalist's problem. We can't say, well, that the law, we have to follow the law. There's almost no law on this.
Wait, Paolo?
I think it depends of the context you put the cartoon. Because if you explain, yes, I think it depends of the context. Because
like the page of the newspaper,
sure.
So if the context is to discuss whether, if the context is the controversy around the cartoon,
yeah,
then
sure.
You
Sure.
have to
you have
explain
to
it.
explain it.
Right.
I think that you have to explain to yeah, sure.
I think I would run the cartoon. I agree. It depends on the content, the contest, and but I really would like my newspaper to take position on that content, on that subject.
That's interesting.
I would publish it, but I wish my newspaper to say something. What's our position on this subject?
Okay.
Ancora una volta, questa è una sessione in inglese, ma io sono a disposizione per tradurre dall'italiano in inglese le posizioni del pubblico. This is an English language session, but I'm ready to translate Italian into English.
So ethical problem number 4. You interview a public figure and are planning a Q&A, a question and answer, in which you'll condense and rewrite the questions and answers. Is this acceptable? A, yes, as long as you edit carefully. B, yes, if you say the quotes were condensed. C, no. Quotes must be exact in quote marks.
I don't know, but I think that you never give questions in advance to public figures.
No.
Yeah.
It's
like
I'm sorry. You interview somebody, right? Then you have to write it in Q&A form, all right? And what you do when you actually write your story.
Oh, okay. So if you give them the questions in advance and then you decide to rewrite them, right? No. Then I didn't get it.
The idea is you get an interview with Tom, all right? You go interview him. Then your editor asks you to write that interview in a Q&A format, okay? Then what would you do with Tom's quotations? Now, are you going to rewrite them or not? That's the idea. Will you be allowed to rewrite them, condense them? You know, because of course, while speaking, we speak, you know, with stops and go and say hum, or, you know, and then sometimes if you want to render the way the person is, you know, sometimes what he really meant, so to say, you may be tempted to rewrite them or condense them. So the options here are, yes, you can edit, of course, carefully, or you can do it, but you have to tell your readers that these were condensed and rewritten, or no. In any case, whatever you put in quotation marks has to be the literal words spoken by the subject. So this is the...
Thank you very much. Well, I would surely, I don't feel the necessity to inform my readers that, hey, I condensed the interview, because I think that's the job of journalists, to choose what's the most important bit in the interview. But I will surely never ever reword it, what he said.
Okay, so B, right?
No, I think in my experience, I think A option is the most, can I say, acceptable for my kind of working, because for publishing an interview in QA style, for paper version of a newspaper, you have also the structure of the page give you a limit. So what's your other option? I got one question, because I have no other pages to publish or in different parts.
But do you think, I think you're saying A, right?
Yeah.
But you don't feel any obligation to to tell the readers that this was condensed and rewritten?
I feel that reading the answers, the reader could know that the speech and the written answer are different, because
You think
yeah,
the readers would understand
yeah,
that this was
I think
condensed?
that this A and pauses there are not in the written style.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different assumptions.
Yes, right.
As you know, there are places like this country where the assumption is, you know, more. It's a gray area where you know sometimes they are actual exact words and sometimes they're not. Okay, this is what the point where we're getting at. Some different opinions from different countries. As said, this is an English language session, but I'd be willing to translate from Italian into English. Questa è una sessione in inglese, ma sono a disposizione per tradurre dall'italiano in inglese. No, via via che entrano le persone.
Mario, I
No?
think Kelly had
Kelly?
From where I am in Australia, a direct quote is a direct quote. So if someone said something, you would put it in quotation marks. If you were to summarise something that they're saying, you would not put that in quotation marks. And that's a very clear way to show what they actually said and put that on the record. So to me, it's very obviously C.
So if it's not in quotation marks, you think people will assume that it's been rewritten or that it's been condensed?
Yeah, probably.
Without having to say so?
I don't think you need to say so. The only time I think it's helpful to say so is if you've written it as a Q&A and you haven't, so the assumption is it's direct quotes, and you might say something like, we've edited this with a light touch just for clarity's sake, or something like that. But if you're actually changing what they say, then I think you need to not put that in quotation marks.
Okay, move on. Ethical problem number 4. You want to interview a company president. He says he must approve your quotes before a publication. Should you A, agree, B, refuse to interview him? Somebody has some thoughts over there, I can tell.
Opinioni, idee, ideas? Come on. Be frank.
If I need the interview, but if I need, yes, I must say I agree, but I know I'm not going to do a good work. But if I need to do my job, if I have to yes.
Let's frame it in another way, because I told you your editor asked you to interview this guy. But no, I mean, you are, in this case, you are the editor deciding, what's the policy of your news outlet. So you don't have to, you have to decide whether, in these cases, you would agree or not. What would you do?
In this case, I refuse to interview him. I feel free to refuse.
He should have the right to check the quotes, not to approve the quotes.
Well, what's the difference between check and
because
approve?
we are in the same level, so we can. If I am the last judge of the interview, I'm the last judge, because I'm the media to the public. I'm the media.
So you feel that he should have the opportunity to suggest changes, but.
In any case, to see them, but not to approve them. Yes or no. We can discuss about it, but
the final decision is yours.
But the final decision is mine.
Just a simple question. What about recording the interview? Is it in the panel? Is this a C solution or what? You didn't take it into consideration, this, or?
Well, I mean, sometimes company presidents will want to approve even recorded quotes because you record it, but they say, but he says, but that's not really what I meant. So you have to change it, you know. So it's sort of the same thing, you know. Sometimes the fact of the recording is not important to the president.
Yeah, but there is a physical evidence, though.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you do in that case?
I will keep it. Well, I work for radio, so there is there is off records, and there is on records. So in this case, I think it can simplify things, in my view.
Yeah, well, that's a very common question as to what part was on the record and what part was off the record, you know. He says off the record, and then he talks for 20 minutes. Is all of that off the record, or just that first sentence? It can be hard to judge.
I think I would refuse, because an interview is also a matter of trust between the interviewer and the interviewed. And I think there is an agreement. You say the truth, and I write the best that I can.
Ethical problem number 5. You're accompanying a military unit on an operation. They insist on the right to censor any of your stories, photos, or video for any reason. Should you A, agree to the censorship, B, not agree, and leave the unit?
I should say here, notice the for any reason, because we know that it's very common for journalists to agree to observe certain security precautions, but we're saying here for any reason.
For often reason, like the security or something else, yes, but any reason, and on white paper before I can just can censor your script. No, I don't agree. I leave the unit because it's how can I say useless because I can't do my job.
Actually, a couple of months ago, I was following a course by the Italian Joint Chiefs of Staff about journalists covering crisis. So I think it's a bit too simple in this case. B solution, the B answer cannot be always followed because I leave the unit if I'm in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan. I say, I don't agree with the censorship, yes. You leave me here. So it's quite, and again, you're traveling with them, so there are, of course, I think it's the big question of embedded journalists. And usually embedded journalists, they sign tons of papers about all these ethical problems. So it goes beyond, it goes beyond journalism. It goes, it's about contract law, I guess, more than about journalism in this case. It can be, and it still is, of course. And then there is the difference, they say, about what you see, no matter where you are with a military union. I see someone who's not, someone shooting to someone, it's one thing. And what about the activity of the military who was escorting me, were with me? I think there is this difference as well. And again, I think here there is a sort of contract law involved as well, not only journalism.
Well, we have seen some very scary contracts. We saw one from the British Army, and it just said absolutely everything must be approved. It was pretty scary.
Ethical problem number 6. A group of women are protesting. The subject of the protest is not unusual, but the women are topless. Should you A, run the photos, B, not run them?
And we're specifically saying here that the subject of the protest is not unusual. So the subject matter of the protest is like many other protests, and many other protests on the same subject. But this has this special je ne sais quoi.
Rosa Maria? Te lo traduco.
Yes.
A.
Yes.
Should run the photos.
Why?
It's normal. It's ethical, it's normal.
Because
now the point is that in other countries it's not so normal. So
yeah, it's not normal in some countries.
Ok, è una immagine assolutamente normale. It's a normal imagine for me and for public, for example, for Italian public. In my opinion, I don't see the problem. I don't see.
Non pensi che potrebbe essere una questione che forse qualcuno che lo pubblica, il disturbo l'abbiamo capito, che questo forse lo fanno apposta e quindi in realtà perché ci può essere un interesse nell'immagine in quanto tale, e che quindi that the image as such, you know, they went to demonstrate topless because, you know, some people like to see topless women on a website or on a page.
No, I don't see the problem.
Okay.
Who sees a problem?
It really depends on the type of media outlet that you are and who your audience is. So that picture might not work if you're running it on a breakfast television program at 7 a.m. in the morning where family's going to be watching, but it might be completely fine on your 10 p.m. news. Or it might be if you're an online organisation that you may not post that picture on your homepage, but it might be something that you click through to with a warning, for example. But I think generally speaking, it's still newsworthy and you could run the photo.
I'm troubled by the question of the subject of the protests not being unusual. Let's say, for example, that students are protesting about an increase in the cost of university education. So the students protest every day for 6 weeks, and you stop covering it because the same protests, the same comments every day. And then one day they protest topless. Does that, from a journalistic standpoint, does that really change the situation so much that you say, we will cover it today because they are topless?
It depends. For me, it depends if the protest are, non riesco a dirlo in inglese, se la protesta ha una, se la forma della protesta è notizia anche per coloro che hanno assistito alla protesta, cioè se la forma della protesta in pubblico provoca attenzione da parte del pubblico presente alla protesta, allora sì. Cioè cambia l'atteggiamento, perché io racconto una relazione diversa tra l'uditorio pubblico reale e la forma della protesta, se no è...
The idea here is that the form of the protest may be news in itself, since there may have been people there. So if that was whatever, shocking or just amusing, or if that was an event in the place, tell me if I'm saying exactly what you're saying, then that it's of course worth publishing.
So the reaction is the news.
Sure.
Okay.
Because I have to tell a story about a form of protest, not about the subject of protest in this case. For me, in this case, the subject is morals. I don't know how to say a moral question, a moral. Una storia di costume, non so come si.
Right, it's a way of life kind of issue. It's not more. It's not anymore a political issue. It's not only a political or economic issue in this case, but it's the issue of women demonstrating topless, perhaps in a town where this never happened before.
Yes. That makes sense.
I have a question, but it will be different if otherwise femen, as in this case, are the streakers on the during Wimbledon or during also men.
Alessandro is referring to a few cases in the past few years where in sports activities like the Wimbledon tennis tournament, you had streakers going through the field, sometimes men and sometimes women. So you're saying whether this should follow into this or not.
Right. And you would feel in this case, the case of a streaker, that it would not be worth publishing?
No, it's a question.
He's asking.
Yeah. Well, I sort of think the first time it would be worth it, but not after that. Everything becomes old. I don't think that people have the right to automatically get the attention of the press when they do the same thing again and again. I mean, Femen, for example, sometimes we cover them now and sometimes we don't at Associated Press. I mean, even Femen has become kind of an old story now. So we don't feel that every time they do this, we don't want to be the puppets, the marionettes of Femen or anybody else. But we don't want them to be able to say, if we go topless, that is a guarantee that we will be covered. We don't want to. We feel that we don't want to be used by people. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to problem 7. Your ethics bar you from accepting gifts, but an official you interview in the Middle East gives you an iPad at the end of your conversation. He says he'll be insulted if you reject his culture's tradition of giving gifts to visitors as a sign of hospitality. Should you A, run the photos, B, not run them?
And actually, this is a mistake. It should say,
it
would say,
sorry.
It should be, it's a mistake. It should say, should you accept the gift or not accept the gift? Yeah, my mistake.
Forse è un'opinione.
And let's assume you don't already have an iPad.
What,
Right.
what about reporting it in your report, saying I had to accept it, and I give it to my bureau, my desk for everyone to use it, but I report it. I reported this circumstance. Doesn't give enough information to the users of my report, to someone who's reading, watching, or hearing what I'm reporting about.
So you're saying that you would disclose the fact that you have received an iPad from the subject of the story?
Quoting that it was a condition, a conditio sine qua non, it was a condition just to report about that, not because I just like it, the iPad. As you say, otherwise I wouldn't have the interview.
So you would put this in the story? That
I
it was
would,
a condition?
yes. In case, of course, it was the only, it was the condition of having the interview, of course. Not to say, okay, if you don't want it, doesn't matter, and I give you the interview. No question about that, I wouldn't accept it.
And he also said, then I would hand the iPad to my news organization. They
Yes.
would do whatever they want. Yeah. Opinioni? Opinions?
Of course, if you accept the iPad, the official still feels that he has given you something of value. Even if you give it to your own news organization, he may still feel that he has shown you hospitality, and therefore you need to write about him with respect. because you are his guest and he's given you this gift.
Or you may feel obliged. Just, you know.
Right. All right. So everyone here is okay with accepting the iPad?
I think if I was going to accept the iPad, I would tell him that this doesn't affect my story and it doesn't affect how I'm going to write about you or present you in the story, just so you're clear to him.
No one is for just flat refusing it.
This happened to a reporter and photographer of ours in the Middle East, and the gift was actually iPhones. He gave them an iPhone to the reporter and the photographer, and we did refuse them. And I think that we refused them, and I think he was very unhappy about it. It was a very uncool scene, but nonetheless, we felt we just could not accept it.
But then may I ask you, the circumstances were such that the reporters and photographers in the field were able to consult with headquarters, or was that their own decision?
We have a rule. We have a rule that you cannot accept a gift that has a value of more than $25. And, you know, we just said that's the rule, and he said, no, but this is my country and my culture and all of that stuff. And we said, well, this is our culture, so.
I just have a question, if that affects your relationship with this person in the future.
Absolutely. It was a very, as I say, it was very uncool, and it did affect the relationship in the future. We had hoped that he would become a good source, and as a result of this, he did not become a good source. Right.
A question, would you do the same again?
Yeah, we'd do the same again. You know, sometimes we, you know, you can, you know, there's a possibility that you could accept it and tell him that I'm going to give this to charity, that I'm going to give this to an orphanage for the orphans to use the iPhone or whatever. But even that we do not accept in our world.
For example, is it possible to give him something of the same value? Yeah, sure.
Well,
I don't know. It's just.
I get it. In principle, I mean, if somebody buys you a beautiful dinner, you could buy them a beautiful dinner. I don't think the Associated Press has $700 to give an iPhone, but yes, if you a dinner or something, yeah, you could probably do that.
It does bring up an interesting question, though, as people are thinking about building their ethics codes, which is how often do you go back to them to reconsider what you've put into it? How often do you make exceptions, right? Could someone come back to someone at the AP in ethics and say, this is the situation here, is this worth our...
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we would ever give an exception about this, but it's, in any individual case, I don't think we would give an exception. But obviously, every news organization every few years has to think about its ethics, and are the ethics of the world changing? And so you have to evolve a little bit. But we would not give, I don't think, a one-time exception in a case. Otherwise, it's not a code. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
6 minutes. Okay, thank you. No warning. Ethical problem number 8. Do victims of war and bomb attacks have a right to privacy, or should we show the horror of the situation? A, don't publish. B, publish. And that would mean this, in this case, a picture, a photograph like this.
Right, that's the whole idea. Putting us into a corner. That's what she said. That's the whole idea behind the exercise.
Yeah, this was an attack in a market in Israel.
Well, the photographer is speaking here.
Thank you. I think this is one of the biggest conflicts of nowadays media generally. I think similarly as the lady said before, I would probably think about what is my publication, whether it's relevant. If I'm running, let's say, newspaper, I will probably think of what is my audience, which country I am, and which area of the newspaper I would publish it. I think there was this comparison of, let's say, bombings in Madrid in 2007, if I'm all right, and they were comparing how Guardian published it, published the photos, how Spanish media published the photos, and it was very interesting because there was this very famous photo of chopped hand on the ground next to the train. And the Guardian completely photoshopped the hand, and they removed it and published it on the front side. Telegraph, they made it, I think, black and white. And what was interesting, in Madrid, the media just published everything. It was the most horrifying photos were all around the papers. So it's interesting to kind of compare and observe how the different countries and different cultures handle it. But I will probably publish it, but let's say not on the front page.
If I may add, though, we're not discussing here at this point the gruesome fact, the bloods and and chopped hands or whatever. We're not discussing here whether your public may be may have problems, issues with the fact that you publish this, but whether the victims, the people who are in the frame, have a right to privacy in these cases. This is the finer issue here.
Right. If this were you, you or me in our underwear, would we want to be shown like that?
Like the lady here, right?
Like the lady here.
Personally, I think that putting this picture or this video does not add anything to the news. It doesn't really. It's not necessary, and for the right the law that we have here could be also very dangerous. Well, I mean, you can be judged, you can, but but the problem. So I think it's useless. I mean, it's a damage that we can avoid to the victim. Mm-hmm. We can publish the news. We can write everything, but to publish as it is, it's just a splatter.
May I add one thing, a question to Tom, who prepared this slide. Do I have another still I can use?
Yeah, if there's another still, you might pick something else.
But this was where it's just the only picture I have.
Right. Some newspapers could publish, you could publish this on paper. If it was a paper newspaper, you could publish it maybe inside the paper and maybe in black and white. Sometimes people will publish these in black and white, but on the web it's hard, it seemed very odd to change it to black and white on the web. You should know that this picture was published on the front page of the New York Daily News in color, like that.
No, I actually just wanted to ask a question. I see there is very little time left, so I'm sorry to hijack the presentation. But you haven't talked at all about enforcement, and I haven't found the word in all the documents that you have published so far. So does your build your own ethics code come with build your own enforcement police for the ethics code?
That's a very good question.
Perhaps we can answer it at the end. Let's see whether we still have one opinion on the one issue here.
English, sono italiano. I think there are rules anyway to help when there is a topic like that. For example, rules that actually are not the same in every nation. But I have an example. In Italy, we have rules to protect babies. So, for example, a child injured during an explosion can be published like that easily. But then I think about what happened in Vietnam, the very famous picture of the baby injured by napalm, and that became a symbol. That became absolutely a symbol. And so I would say, yes, I would take the picture, and I would, I think the intention is anyway a good intention. Of course, we know what we are working on, what is our idea when we are doing something like that. And so that's what we give to the editing staff, and I think we should give the picture to the editing staff too.
Grazie. I think this is, I mean, of course we have like tens of issues we could raise. We are almost to the end of it. I think Tom can answer the proper question that was asked. And
yeah, the project does not discuss enforcement. We think that is it's a question for every country and every culture, and it's a legal question in some places. Our project is concerned with what you think is right for your organization.
And if I may add, since we believe in transparency, the whole idea behind this is that you choose your values and your criteria, you build your code, you publish your code. So probably your users, your readers, are supposed to be the enforcers of your.
That's a very good point.
At least, So this is, a very broad exercise, as international, as multicultural as it could be, as we can make it. But the important thing for us, I think, at least for me, is to raise the issues, to raise the issues, to have the issues in front of us, to confront them and decide, and then tell our readers that these are our ethical criteria. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for coming, and please remember bit.ly/ONA Etica. That's the initial documents on the ethical initiative. Che hai detto? Sì. And dov'è qui? Anyway, there is, of course, my friend Alessandro tells me that there is a workshop organized again by the ONA at 3:30 in the afternoon on journalist reputation on social networks, run by Barbara Sgarzi, at the Hotel Brufani. Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.